Welcome back to the shop. I'm Jeff from Today's Craftsman, and we thought today we would show you a little bit about using a joiner. You know, what it is, what we use it for, why we use it, and how we use it. So we'll show you a little bit about our specific joiner, and we'll join some boards and show you what to expect if you're going to be using a joiner for the first time.
I'm going to jump in here just for a moment and give you just a brief history. I bought this joiner 18, 19 years ago when I built the shop out behind the house. One of the reasons I got this particular jointer was it was the longest bed. It's about a 7-foot bed and it's 10 inches wide at the price point. It was about $2 grand at the time. I'm not sure what they're going for now. And it was really solidly built. We've had no problems. We have replaced the straight knives with a helical setup, and it's much improved. But one thing Jeff will probably touch on is, you know, the quality of the particular machine, what to look for when you're in the market for a joiner, and a long bed is really something that'll help you out. Probably, for me, almost more so than width. One thing I will add, maybe on a off topic, is get yourself a good set of push blocks. We like these. What are these called? Grip 6? Or is that the belt? No, these are just called grip blocks.
Grip block.
Grip blocks. I'm going to hand it back to Jeff. I love listening to him explain how to use these machines, and it's not surprising that I even learned some stuff listening and watching these videos.
So Rob led us into the machine here. This is an Oliver 4240. This is a 10-inch joiner. So that is this measurement here. You can see the bed is 11 inches back here, but we have 10 inches of cutter head. This is a helical head joiner now. Originally this had straight knives, and the straight knives are very loud, and they produce a different type of cut than a helical cutter. So we replaced the straight knives with this helical head. Just a lot easier to push things through, a lot quieter. And we're not doing anything straight off of the joiner where we want like a planed look. Straight knives gives you more of a planed look. This, maybe I'm getting in the weeds a little bit with
okay.
the...
Keep going. I can cut it out.
Yeah. So we replaced this with a Shelix, and we've been very happy with it. It's like about $1,000 upgrade, so it's definitely worth it. We don't have to sharpen these. These are segmented cutters, so they're 4-sided. So let's say we have a piece of walnut that has a BB from a shotgun shell in there, which has happened before, or somebody shot it with a .22, and we hit a piece of lead or a nail, you know, and this chips, we could just turn it, and we get four times the life out of these. So that's an advantage to the helical head. Rob had mentioned that this is a long bed joiner, so the bed is just over 7 feet, 84 3/8 of an inch. So the reason that you would want a long bed is that the beds are your reference surface. So you need ideally you would have the same size in-feed and out-feed as the piece that you're trying to plane. So really, the ideal length on this is anything under 40 inches, you could say. You can plane longer things, and we do, but you want to have as much reference surface as possible. So you come in here, and your cutter head is actually higher than this in-feed table, and you're out-feeding onto the higher table. So you can see here that the outfeed table is higher. So you're moving just from one flat reference to another. And if you're doing something really long, you want to be able to have enough flat reference before, I don't really know how to explain this part.
Live until you figure it out.
if you have a let's say you have a piece, this piece for example, And this was really long. So let's say this was an 8-footer. You can see right now that it's got some curve to it this way. If you didn't have enough reference surface, you know, this piece would still be hanging out here, and you're dipped way down. This is an over-exaggeration because of this bow in the board. So by the time you get to the cutter head, you're kicked way up in the air like this, and then you're getting out to here, and the board is going to lift back up on the backside because you're now hitting this low point again, if that makes sense. If we had a nice long curved board, it might be easier to explain. But yeah, basically, you know, when you're milling up rough lumber, you can see here we have a gap in the middle. But if I go over here, you know, that gap is closing up. I'm tight now here and here. So if it were long, you're cutting parts off of the board that don't need to be cut. I don't know if that's making any sense to any of you.
I'm just enjoying watching the suffering.
Floundering. If you've done a lot of joining, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, let's see if this is a better example.
That side's been joined.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so here we go. So, right now, you could see we're touching the joiner bed, you know, a couple inches from the front, right here. I'm motioning with my head, which you probably can't see, and the back right here. So this is all referenced down flat. So we start cutting, we cut that off, but look, now we're touching here, and as we keep going, oh, look, we're touching here again. So you're never going to get this thing flat because you're changing the angle that this thing is entering the cutter head as you're moving it along, because what was once hanging off of the back over here is now hitting this bed. So if you don't have a long bed, you're not going to be able to get long pieces flat. Basically, that was like the 4-minute roundabout way to explain that.
That's the short story long version.
Yeah. The accidental on purpose.
Accidental text on purpose.
So yeah, we want to have a long bed joiner because we deal with, you know, long pieces of wood. We build doors that, you know, maybe interior doors that are 7 feet tall, 8 feet tall, whatever. So that's enough about the long beds. This is your blade guard. It's just on a little spring. This is probably the chintziest part of this whole joiner, I think. It's just a piece of stamped metal, you know, that swings out of the way and it'll go back automatically. So that covers up the cutter when you're working, and it, you know, pushes out of the way. We have the adjustment here to change your width of cut. So something that typically we'll do is we'll try and keep the fence set as small as possible. That way we don't have all this cutter head exposed. So if you're joining narrow boards or you're doing the edges of boards, you tend to try and, you know, bring this all the way over here and drop it down to like a 4-inch, 3.5-inch cutter head, so that we don't have 10 inches of cutter head exposed. This here will adjust the angle of this fence, which I'm not going to touch because it's set at 90. I can't think of a time that we've used the joiner. You know, you can turn this and joint boards at, I think this probably goes up to 45 degrees. It does have some stops and stuff, but we keep it set at 90 because we just don't do any joining at an angle. So we want to just keep that set. So this is, I think, a 3 horsepower joiner, and it's been good power-wise. We haven't had any issues with it bogging down or anything. But I guess the most important part of the video would be showing you how to read the lumber before it goes into the joiner, and then sort of some technique as to how to actually joint boards and get a nice flat surface. So I have a board here. We can take a look. So 99.9% of the time we work with rough lumber. So it comes in like this. It's rough on 4 sides. This is a piece of red oak. And you need to decide whether, well, you have a couple things to decide. Are you going to run it through this way or this way? I guess first I should say you always want to joint your face first, not your edge. So you want to joint your face first. So are you going to joint this face or this face, and then are you going to send it in this way or are you going to send it in this way? So what we do is you can either look down your board like this, which we always called like eyeing. This one's pretty flat, but basically we're looking to see, is this curved this way or is it curved this way? Another way is you can, lay it down on the joiner. That's a horrible noise. And see, which side is crowned or flatter. You want to put your flatter side down first. So to me, this side looks good. You can see we're pressing on the corners and the board's not jumping around. Whereas if we do it on this side, you can see. So it's going to be harder to joint that side and get it flat, because this one is already relatively flat when referencing on this table. So we know that we're going to joint this side. The next step would be the feed direction. Are we going to feed this way or are we going to feed this way? So it's hard to tell how the grain is running out on rough sawn lumber. You can see here, this side can't see anything because this is where they painted the outside of the log, the stack of lumber. So it's hard to tell. So what I like to do is I'll feel it. So this way I can feel that the grain is sticking up like this. I can feel it grabbing onto my hand, and this way feels more smooth because the grain is facing that way. So this feels smooth and this feels rough. So the smooth way is the way that I want to feed it in, this way. Because the cutter head is coming in like this. So we want it to follow the grain. So once you figure out which way you're going to run it in, you set your fence, and then you can turn the joiner on and join it. And you won't be able to hear me while I'm doing that, but maybe I'll join it and then we could talk about a little bit of the technique. Before we joint that piece of red oak, I want to touch on something else here. Harder to illustrate on that because it's a little bit flatter. You can see we have this cup in this board. So you don't want to joint this side first because look, this is rocking all over the place. So aside from a bow in this direction, in the length, you also want to look at it in the width because this is a much more stable surface than this. If you put the crowned portion down, you're going to have a really, really wobbly surface to try and joint. So you want the most stable possible starting point with your board. You could see as I was joining this pine board, you didn't see it with the red oak because it went flat in one pass, but you know, we had some areas, basically this entire front, I think, and maybe a spot back here that were still rough sawn after that first pass. We went flat almost along the whole thing on the second pass, and then on the third pass we cleaned up just that last little bit. So your piece is getting flatter and flatter. You know, you're creating more flat reference surfaces as you continue to do passes. Sometimes you get lucky like this, and in one shot you're flat. You don't always have to be completely flat on the entire face, because what we're going to do with this next would be go to the planer. So as long as you have nice references on your edge, you can have a little hollow down the center if you plan on, you know, planing this, because again, we're going to a flat reference. One way you know that your pieces are really flat is they'll be a little bit sticky to the table. It's like when you're, you know, sharpening a chisel. When you get really flat, things want to sort of stick together, and you can even kind of hear how flat it is. In terms of technique, the way that I joint is I use these push blocks. So on this side, I'm really trying to do as little downward pushing as possible, because we want just to reference the table and we don't want to push this board and deform it. So coming across, it's going to be hard to sort of skate that across, but when I get to here, this is when I start pushing down. And really, I'm just focusing all my pressure on this front hand while trying to keep this one, you know, as far back as possible, because I don't want to influence, you know, the center of the board and what's going on here. And then trying to continue moving. You don't want to push 6 inches and reposition your hands and push 6 inches again. You really want one continuous motion. You can slow down and speed up a little bit, but you'll get burn marks across the face of your board if you're, you know, stopping and starting. Similarly, on the table saw, the same thing will happen. So yeah, I mean, once you joint your faces, you can joint your edge, unedge at the same time. Maybe we go over that, because you have to read the grain there too. Personally, I would now take this board over to the planer, and I would make a parallel face on this side before joining any of the edges. But for the sake of the fact that this is a joining video, I'll show you how to join an edge. So same thing, we want to look for the right edge. Do we want this edge where we have a hollow in the middle, or do we want this edge where it's flying up? Well, you can see here it's rocking, and here it's not. So same as the face, this is the edge that we want to joint. We were talking about how this fence is 90 degrees to the table, so we want to reference our flat face against this fence and run it through. The reason I like to wait is because we want to look at how this grain is running out, because if we run it through, you know, with the grain running out in the wrong direction, we might get a bunch of tear out. So the tip that I found that I like is you kind of like look for like an airplane taking off. Like this is the runway and the airplane is taking off. So you want to see your grain running in this direction, which you can see it is. But the problem is we're going to flip this board around and now it's running in the opposite direction. So that's why I like to wait, because you have the ability to flip your board around and reference either face on the planer. So that's just my thought. You can even see here, see these pieces, these are going to want to tear out. But we'll joint this edge and we'll see if we get any tear out. This is a situation, like I was mentioning before, you want to bring your bed all the way over. And again, I'm looking to mostly press against the fence and let the weight of the wood, you know, keep it down to the table. So most of my pressure is going to be this way, and I'm going to have a little bit of pressure down here once I get to that side of the cutter head. Rob's gonna turn on the dust collection and we'll turn on the joiner. So you can see here all this tear out. There's places where you'll never really avoid it, even with the helical head like here where we have like reversing grain. But in my opinion, it's better to wait to joint your edge until after both sides are flat, because what we would have been able to do is turn this board around and reference this planed face and get a nice joint without tear out. You know, a lot of times when we're doing a job, we only have so much lumber and we get down to the point where it's like we need every stitch. And you know, if you get a bunch of tear out on the edge like this, your boards are getting more and more narrow, and sometimes, you know, they're not wide enough at that point. So best bet is to wait until both sides are flat. So that was I won't say concise, but it was a small glimpse at joining. We're talking about maybe doing something a little more condensed in the future. But I think this is good if you've never used a joiner before. You get to understand how it works and some tips how to get good results. So yeah, if you have any questions on joiners, joining wood, or any other processes, be sure to leave them in the comments, and we'll see you on the next video.
Working on a thumbnail here for our next video.
Could be here for a while.
This is an Instagram post, our story. I like taking video because then you can do a screen grab. All right, good enough.